Hello. It's 3:30 in the morning and I can't sleep. And anyone who knows me will know how ridiculous that is because, with the exception of a very small period of insomnia during my student years, I'm one of those people that can sleep anywhere, anytime. I fall asleep within 5 minutes and I'm done. But I've been laying, tossing and turning in bed for nearly, well, over 4 hours now. And the reason for that is because I got this idea for this video, and the words and sort of what I was going to say just kept going around in my head, and I realised that I wasn't ever going to get any sleep until I sat here and made the bloody thing. So this video is all about how how I wrote my book, uh, Death of a Dreammonger. You can't see it because of the not for resale proof. Death of a Dream-Pedlar, sorry, by Adam Stevenson. And I use the word dreammonger because for a lot of its life that was the book's name. And I'm going to tell you how it came about. But it's a weirdly personal tale, and it does go to some dark places. But much like the book, we'll get through the dark places and we'll come somewhere light by the end of it. Uh, so yeah, a few things about me. I've always loved books since before I could remember. Even before I could speak, I'd be following people around with a book and hitting them with it and making them read it to me. And pretty much since I could write, I've written stuff. Um, I think my first story was about the age of 7, about a grasshopper that could jump houses. There was the rip off of Fantastic Mr. Fox. There was a 43-page epic about a private eye peregrine falcon. But I mean, I've always written, and I've written. I wrote even as a kid scripts, stories, this, that, the other. Um, One of my problems as I've got older is I now I now start novels, and I tend to write 20 to 30,000 words of a novel before trailing off. So there's lots of unfinished novels there, some which I don't even know where they are now. They could be, I think they're on floppy disks in a bin somewhere, who knows. But yeah, so I've always written. And as I went into university, I was writing a novel, a sort of weird spiritual absurdist quest. During my first year, I then, as well as writing that novel, started writing the sequel to that novel. And I started writing another thing, which was a novel consisting of two interlocking novellas about fairies that was called Dom Fonglemer McGeek, because I was into Volapük at the time, and that's roughly Volapük for the house of the well of the many possibilities. And then I was writing this other thing that wasn't. It was a bit of a script I'd written a couple of years before, mixed with some sort of diary thing that mixed into this, and I just kept writing that, and that was called Barely a Working Title. And so by my third year at university, I'd half written loads of novels, and weirdly, this Barely a Working Title had turned into a full and complete novel, which went through many name changes and ended up being called Me, Myself, and Colin. And so I finished that in my last year of university. Round about the same time, I also wrote the 50,000 words of essays I should have been writing throughout my time at university. And all of that was done, and maybe I was going to have a little break from writing. But instead, I caught something. Now, this was the early days of the phone up NHS, and they told us it was dysentery. Whatever it was extremely painful, and I couldn't be too far away from the toilet at any time. So what's a person going to do? I was in my little student digs, with tied to the toilet, and back in those days, only the real show-offs had internet in their student digs, and so I wrote in between going to the toilet, and I wrote for something. There was this competition. It was a 10,000 word long short story. And like I did many times, I often wrote something as a novel and then turned it into a script and then turned it back into a novel. And so I had this idea that I'd been writing as sort of a monologue. And the idea was no, hang on, back a bit. So we'd done this thing with the student plays where we were given text by women writers and we had to recontextualize them. And I was given a bit of 448 Psychosis by Sarah Kane, which is a very depressing play with no characters in it. It's just lines, and then you divvy out the lines amongst your company and do oral effects and things. And they're all very depressing. And so I did it. I was in pajamas and a pink dressing gown, and I shuffled, looking like I was tired, and I was holding a piece of paper which had the script on it actually, and it was things like, I hate myself, I hate everyone, the world is a dark and terrible place. And I read it out loud, and I was ticking it as if it was some sort of questionnaire. And it definitely recontextualised it. It got a lot of laughs, which I don't think Sarah Kane normally does. And I like this sort of character. And I thought I'd write another monologue for this character. And it was inspired by something a friend said to me. So this friend had quit university. And when he quit, he'd gone to the careers advisor. And the careers advisor had said, so, what do you want to do with your life? He said, well, actually, I want to be a pirate. And so I used this dozy character talking about how he was going to be a pirate. And I thought I'll turn that into this 10,000 word short story in between visiting the loo. And I'll probably on one of those loo visiting journeys, it struck me that I couldn't make that last 10,000 words. It was because this character was sort of a bit simple, or at least a bit naive, and so the problems of being a pirate in the modern day would not have struck them, and that seemed to be cheating a bit. I thought it'd be more fun. What about a character who knows that it's a ridiculous thing, but is going to do it anyway? So I created this character, and he was called James Drummond. And I thought, well, he's got to be someone who's used to doing these weird, ridiculous things. And so James Drummond used to have a company. And what the company did was made people's dreams come true for a fee. And the idea was that through logistics, wishful thinking, thinking outside the box, and just sort of crazy plans, he could make these incredible dreams come true for people. But in the story, he'd retired from this, even though he was quite young, because the dream the thing he was most asked to do was, can you make me happy? And it was the one he couldn't succeed. It was the only one he couldn't do. And sort of depressed by this, he decided to retire and make his own dream come true, which was to become a pirate. And so what he does is he goes to the Norfolk Broads. He gets a wherry, which is a little ship with a sail that collapses so they can go under the bridges. Black sail as well, black tarred sail. And he set up a sort of a scheme where people on their Norfolk Broad holidays would be sailing about. And he'd attack them as the pirate. And people would sign up to it to make boring Norfolk Broad holidays more interesting. And that's how he becomes a pirate. And he was assisted by his adopted son Morgan, who was an actor. And he was such a consummate actor, you never actually knew what he was thinking because he was always acting. And the bulk of the story was actually them renting this house with this couple, Mr. and Mrs. Dow, and they weren't getting on. And Mrs. Dow was missing her daughter, who was a long way away. And so James, as well as sort of sorting out his dream of becoming a pirate, sort of sorts their problems out. And I really liked this story. I called it Press Gang. Sent it off. It didn't get anywhere, but I really liked it. In fact, when I reread it again, probably over 10 years ago now, I read it on a piece of paper on the tube, and it's the only thing I've ever read that made me miss my tube stop because I liked it so much. So I really like this story. A thing about the names. So James Drummond, who very important character in this Death of a Dream-Pedlar. He is the Dream-Pedlar. He's named Drummond because it was one of Blackbeard's aliases. Morgan, who's also in the book, after Captain Morgan. Mr. and Mrs. Dow. Dow was sort of a failed pirate who got hanged for stealing fish. And James. So the original name of the company that made dreams come true was called Jim'll Fix It's, because at the time the news of Jimmy Savile hadn't come out. And in fact, the only two celebrities I've ever really written to were Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris. So I know how to pick them. So yeah, so James Drummond is called James after Jimmy Savile. So the company changed its name from Jimmy Fix-Its to the Dream Instantiation Company. Instantiation being a philosophical word for the making real of a concept. One of the only philosophical things I've ever, only things I've ever actually used from my philosophy degree. Anyway, so I wrote this whilst poorly, and then I came back from university, having got a 2-2, and I felt I'd failed, really. And I'd done all sorts of things at university, all sorts of things that now looking back on, I look at and think, oh, wasn't it great? I did all these different things. But at the time, I felt I'd just failed at all these different things. I felt like utter failure. As it felt at the time, I felt I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my place in the world. And to be honest, I couldn't really see any place that would fit me in it if I ever worked out who I was. And so it's a very, very difficult year when I came back from university. I was not in a very good place at all. I got a job at a toy shop, and it was a summer contract. And one of the main reasons I got this job at the toy shop was because it was a location in that first novel that I'd finished and was now sending off to publishers because I didn't know about agents. And back then you could send more things to publishers. It was all in paper. I remember getting a very nice letter back from Serpent's Tail who said it was really good, but they didn't fit their catalogue. And that was before We Need to Think About Kevin came out. So obviously their catalogue was getting a lot more serious than what I was offering them. But yeah, so I got this job in the toy shop. I didn't get the contract renewed after the summer, possibly because I wasn't very good at straightening all the boxes of the toys, but also because I used to nip off into the stock cupboard and cry, which is probably not a very good trait in an employee. So then the job I got was the job I'd had before going to university. And while I was at university, the Labour government had introduced the minimum wage. And the minimum wage was, and still is, tiered for ages. And the wage I've been paid before university was more than the minimum wage now, and they reduced it. So I was now doing the same job for less money. And again, just not knowing what to do with my life or who I was, and just feeling just dreadful and confused and lost. But I still wrote some stuff. In fact, that was when I set up my first YouTube channel. It was called Bowsetic, and it's still up there. And this is the channel trailer I made.
A pirate ship in a tree.
As you can see, I put more effort into my videos back then, and it was going to all be about my writing and all this. And I was still writing. I'd gone back to the fairy book. I had a few other little bits and bobs that didn't quite get anywhere, and then I had this James thing. And as I was doing the job, I was a waiter. I once smashed 300 plates in one go. I counted them out before I smashed them, so I know exactly how many I smashed. That was an accident, though. Didn't mean to. So as I was waiting, I just kept thinking it was just a game in my head of dreams and then how to make them happen. And it was a fun game. But the trouble is, everyone I made happen had these unintended consequences. They all ended up sad somehow. It was, these dreams coming true and all these really interesting, ways of doing it, but then it always backfired, and that was probably a lot about the mood I was in at the time. Um, so yeah, so I was doing this and I was coming up with these things, but I hadn't really got a story yet. I thought maybe James's life, and I thought what might be fun is if I never wanted it to be from James. I wanted James to remain sort of an enigma. So every chapter would be a new person describing a new bit of his life. And so I wrote a chapter about him going to the careers advisor and asking to be a pirate, and them spitballing about how you'd be a pirate. And I wrote a beginning which was narrated by a reporter. It was a young woman reporter with her cameraman, this Asian cameraman guy. And what they were reporting on was his funeral, which was a big state funeral, and they were in Trafalgar Square. But everyone hated him because of all these unintended consequences of these dreams. And so it was this big grand funeral where everyone was quite glad the guy was dead. But I couldn't. I mean, obviously, I couldn't write that as a novel, because how would you really write a novel where every chapter is a different narrator? I mean, maybe I could have a go at that now, but that's ridiculous. I had some ridiculous ideas then. And during that year, what also happened was three of my grandparents died, and so our house was a house of mourning. Everybody was in pieces. Everything was bad. With some of that money that I got from their grandparents, I decided to go away for a month to Spain. I wanted to go see the Gaudis and stuff. So I did, sort of. I ran out of money after 2 weeks and had to come back early, partly because I was bad with the money and partly because I was robbed a few times. And it was a really intense experience, this trip. There were some huge highs and some huge lows and some really embarrassing moments, and some of the most foolish things I've ever done in my life I did on this holiday. I was kind of reckless, and I was kind of giddy with happiness and sadness and all sorts of emotions. It was intense. And when I had to book this early plane home from Barcelona, I'd gone to Madrid, San Sebastian, Santiago, Bilbao, Madrid, Barcelona. And so it was 2 days before I was supposed to go back. And I suddenly realized who I was, and I hated it. I thought, God, you're an idiot. You're an idiot that does these things as that fortnight I'd had. You're an idiot like that. There is a place in the world for you. It's going to be a place of penury. You're going to be poor. You're going to be humiliated. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to look stupid. You're going to be lonely. That is your life. There you go. That's what you've got. And I decided I don't really want that. I think I'll get off the train. And so for my last day there, my plan was to go up to Montjuic, which is a hill in Barcelona where they had the Olympics. And I had a notepad. And I was going to plan how to end it all. Why you need to plan it, I don't know. But yeah, I was going to put my thoughts in order in that sense. How and what I'd need to tell people. And yeah, that was my plan. Something scuppered that plan though. And what scuppered it was the day before, on a bench, I'd found a book. This is where books saved my life. So this was before e-readers, so I hadn't put any books in my bag, because at the rate I read them, the bag would have all been books. So I'd written stuff, I'd had a notepad, but I hadn't read anything for 2 weeks, which I don't think I've ever done since I could read, and I don't think I've ever done since. So my dodgy mental state might even be partly because of lack of reading. But there was a book, and it was in English, and it was one I even wanted to read. It was Arthur and George by Julian Barnes. Not one of my favourite authors. I find his endings are terrible, which is really ironic, because he wrote a book called Sense of an Ending, and he just doesn't seem to have one. But I'd picked up this book, And I took it with me up the hill because I thought, well, I'll read a couple of chapters while I'm making my morbid plans. So I opened the book and I started reading it, and I read the whole thing. It was 350 pages or so. And you know that bit when you're reading a book, and I'm going to use mine as an example here, and you get to the end, and you look up, and you're just sort of blinking, and you're back into the world. I did that, and the world was beautiful. It was gorgeous. There was this storm in the distance. So there was this heavy, heavy cloud, and you could even see the rain as a column over there above the sea, and the seagulls all wheeling around. But over here was beautiful sun, and there were like sparrows chirping, and it was gorgeous. It was so lovely, and I had that satisfaction of, when you get to the end of the book and you have that, like when you have a good meal or something. And then again, I realised who I was. Yes, I am going to be that person who, they're not going to have a lot of money in life. They're not going to have the kind of successes that you could brag to people. But I'm not really the kind of person who wants those things or needs those things. I'm the kind of person who can go from blackest of black to brightest of bright just through reading a good book and seeing some birds. I'm that person. I'm the person that can walk down just walking around, see a sparrow, see a nice flower, sit on a bench, read a chapter, listen to a song I like, have a chat with a friend, and these are all wonderful. That's the person I am. That's the life I was going to live. That's the place I was going to fit. I was going to fit in the place of, lots of discomfort, yes. Some humiliation, yes. Difficulty, boredom, yes. But so much joy. And since then, I've never been that low, to be honest. Since then, I get frustrated with things. You should see me trying to use a smartphone. But yeah, since then, that has been there in me. And that is, that's books, that's people, that's a cup of tea, which I'm pouring out now because I've already talked too long and I haven't even started writing the novel yet. But that is the sense of which this book needs to be read. So when I've said at the back, Death of a Dream-Pedlar is a lively exploration into a curious world of an unforgettable heroine, a mystery, a lark, a look at the nature of dreams, and a celebration of the triumph over suicidal ideation. That's where this comes from. That sort of seeing colour again, and that it's quite nice. The world, life, it's quite good, That's the spirit this book is written in. So after that holiday, I moved to London, and I moved to London to go to university to do an MA in writing, and I buggered that up as well because I thought I'd got MA at City University because me and the woman at City got on really well. But I realised 4 days before the course started when the university emailed me and said, hey, do you want to come and register? That I was at Middlesex University. And so instead of being in walking distance of university, which is where it's sort of planned to be, I was the other end of the tube line. I had to go all the way once a week. And so for that year, I wrote, my university things. I went, stories. And I was also revising the book I'd written. And I was also coming up with this really stupid idea for a novel, which started off with a woman working in a shoe shop in Oxford Street. And a man who used to work at the shoe shop comes down it. And he's followed by a herd of magical cows. And then the story was about her and what she'd done while waiting, or not waiting for him because she hadn't been waiting, but in that period, what she'd been doing. And here's weird magical journey, which ended up with these cows. I know, ridiculous, but yeah. So I got to the second year because the MA being once a week was over 2 years, and the big project was write some short stories or 20,000 words of a novel. I was like, well, what do I go for? And I had the cow story, I had the fairy thing, and I had the scraps of this thing about the man who made the dreams come true. And I went with that one in the end. And I can't remember why now. I think I was way more invested in the fairy one, but I went with that one. And the people liked what I'd read, but they all said, you can't write a story with new chapters. You need to have a character. And so I sort of took the woman reporter and the cameraman from the beginning, and they became Eve Lewis and Manna. And so she's Eve Lewis because I'm Adam Stevenson. So Robert Louis Stevenson, Adam and Eve Lewis. And he's Manna because originally he descended from a trapdoor, so he was Manna from heaven. And so I had these characters, and they were going to go around and discover the secrets of this company and of this man who had now died. And by the way, this was all before I got into the 18th century as well. that happened through my masters for a stupid set of circumstances, but that's another story for another day. So I wrote these 20,000 words, and in fact I handed in my dissertation on what was supposed to be my first day of work at school, when very first time I started working at school. So while I was writing this dissertation, I'd been working as a open top bus tour guide. I'd lost that job, and then I'd been working at Whittards, and they slashed half their shops, so I lost that job. And then I'd got a terrible job as a barker for the London Tombs, which is a complete rip-off. Do not go, it's shit. And where I'd paint myself as a zombie and come inside, all this nonsense. And I got swine flu on my birthday and lost that job. And in between that, I had no money. I owed my landlady so much money. She was so kind to me. To get the job interview, I actually begged some people on the street for some money to top up my Oyster card to get the bus to go to the job interview for the school. This is how poor I was. I was living off rice and frozen veg, and I still didn't lose any weight. So so I handed in the dissertation on what was supposed to be the first day of that job, and I carried on writing the book. And so we created this. So Opening Fictions 2010, Middlesex University. This was supposed to be the thing they sent to agents and things. I don't think anyone got anything out of it, to be honest. And so then the book was called Death of a Dreammonger. And it started off actually with this really fun scene about Eve trying to get the attention of the guy in the corner shop, because there's a guy in the corner shop near me who never looked at you, and so she keeps trying to get his attention. And in that original version of the book, by the time I finished it in 2011 in the end of the book, she got his attention in the very last chapter, and that book ended it. And I was very pleased with this. I loved this. I thought it was really good. And I read it and I reread it. And then I sent it off, and I got what I always get, which is positive rejections. They're supposed to be rare, but they're my main thing, to be honest. I got things like, "We think you and your book are marvellous. Unfortunately, we don't know how to place it." Basically, everyone was saying they like it, but they don't know what to do with it. And I think it's because it is, this coming out of darkness into light. It's a happy book about suicide and suicidal ideation. I think that's the sticking point, to be honest. And so I did other things, worked on other books, other projects, and all kinds of this, that, and the other. I started getting into my 18th century stuff, and then I saw I put it in for a publisher, which was a crowdfunding thing, which doesn't exist anymore. It's called Britain's Next Bestseller. They didn't make any bestsellers, and that's when I started this channel. So if you look at the early videos on this channel, they're all little aspects of the book, and if you're interested in the book, I recommend you see them, though they are aspects of a very different version of the book. And that's when I realised I'm not very good at hustling. So didn't quite work. I didn't make my goal. So I carried on, doing other things. And I thought, well, I'll think about printing this myself. I looked up ISBNs and I sent it to an editor who said they wouldn't edit it because they didn't understand it. And I sent it to a friend who is an editor. It's called Sharmila Peak. And she was wonderful. If Sharmila ever sees this, thank you very much. If I'd not accidentally not missed off the dedication, you'd have been one of the people on there. Yeah, but I missed off the dedication. Sorry, Sharmila. And so she had tons of suggestions, and one of them was, you know, this sort of villain you've got. The big reveal of the villain is that they're a villain. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right about that. And then she's like, Eve starts off as a really good detective, but then she kind of loses the detecting bit a bit. And it's like, oh, yeah. And then the big one was, what's all the pirate shit? It's like, well, it's how the book started. It started with someone wanting to be a pirate. She was like, yeah, but you're trying to tie it in thematically with this notion of dreams and pursuing dreams and trying to capture dreams when dreams aren't capturable. They're, you know, the thing to aim for. And pirates, yeah, they grab things and they swing on chandeliers and stuff, but this sounds more like knights on a quest. So I rewrote some bits with her ideas, and then I got more ideas, and I essentially rewrote the whole thing. If I mean, I must have a copy of the old version somewhere on some file. I don't know. Cool. I'm very bad at keeping all this stuff. But the book that hopefully you'll be buying is very different now, and it's a lot tighter. And one of the changes that I made, which I sort of saw, was, let's say, it's this coming into light, you know, this triumph over the darkness. But in the original version, I veered into flippancy. There's one thing to go, yay, death, not today, and there's another thing to go, nah, 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 nah. And I think I've veered on the right side of that now. And so I beefed it up. I added more characters, some really good characters. Eve's mum, who was sort of a passing reference in the original, is in this now, and I really like her as a character. She's really good. She's secretly the person who knows what's what. And the character of the actor, he was also someone who was just in passing. And he's been more integrated in this, and he's an interesting character as well, and it got me to write. And then there's a scene on Hornsey Road Bridge. If you're wondering what this picture is, that is my drawing of Hornsey Road Bridge, better known as Suicide Bridge. And the original version had probably my favourite scene on it. But I rejigged it, and in some ways the rejig, I don't know, it misses some of what it was, but it adds some else. Anyway, I'm very happy with what I've ended up with. So I got this new version and started sending this out, and again, positive rejections, loads of positive rejections. We love it, we don't know what to do with it. I entered it into a competition, the Novel London competition. I came third. The judge said,
what I loved about this, there was an incredible sense of place. The way I instantly clicked with the characters, I loved the sense of mystery and the pacing being absolutely spot on. It was one of the very rare first chapters I have ever read where I can't imagine any agent not being desperate to read chapter 2, and that's a remarkable thing to say that you don't say very often, and that's Death of a Dream-Pedlar. I don't have anything to give you because your prize is something that you need to speak to Safina afterwards, but who's taking photos? Cool. So we're going to recreate this later with photos. Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
And they gave me this software, which I've actually used to format this. So, yeah, it looks pretty legit inside. And the reason it looks pretty legit inside is because of Vellum, it's called, which I won as a prize. So that was nice. But so after winning this thing, I really wanted I really wanted to, to go through the proper channels of publishing. I really wanted that legitimacy. I didn't think I could call myself a proper writer if I just printed it myself. Yeah. So that, I kept sending it out, and then I've been writing other things and all that. And what happened was, this summer, I've got really cracking on with my new Samuel Johnson novel, right? Which I think will get through, traditional publishing. Maybe it won't, but and I'd like at least one book through that, just cause. But in writing this, there's a bit of me was like, I'm gonna have to let Dream-Pedlar go. And it changed from Dream-Monger to Dream-Pedlar, because in between that time I read Death's Jest book, which has the poem Dream-Pedlary in it, in which the little epigraph, if there were dreams to sell, what would you buy? Thomas Lovell Beddoes' Death's Jest book. So it changed to Dream-Pedlar, because a lot of people didn't get what a dream-monger might be anyway. I mean, it's the same thing as someone who sells dreams, but hey, there you go. So yeah, partly to get on with the Samuel Johnson book, I needed to put that to bed. And then partly I went to a thing here in Grimsby. It was a writers' event, and it was all writers who published their books for Amazon. And I picked up a few, and essentially they looked as good as the effort that was put into them. And I thought, oh, you know what? If I did it myself, I could make it how I want it. And it would all be me. There wouldn't be anything that wasn't me. The cover would be me, the design, everything would be me. It would be my book. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I say I've been writing all my life, but I wrote my first novel when I was 21. So I've been a novelist since I was 21. And yet when people go, what have you written? What can I get? I go, there's nothing really. But now I can go. Get Death of a Dream-Pedlar. And so this is, that's the end of the story. I mean, I'm going to make another video, I think, about doing it this way, and some of the things some of the odd systems and things, and how I design the cover. I'll probably do that when I've got my next copy. No, I don't know. It's got that line across it. I wish I hadn't ordered that one now. I wish I'd ordered a proper one. But yeah, so that's the story of how this book came about. And it's been following me about from basically all my adult life now, in one form or another. So it's just something cathartic about getting it out. And I mean, I'd love for you to get it. Of course I would, because, I'd love for people to get it in paperback or hardback, physical form, because I love the idea of my book being on someone's bookshelf. That's exciting. But as I say, Kindle, only 99p. Be churlish not to. Especially seeing as I seem to have spent half my life bloody writing the thing. Anyway, now I've said that, maybe I can go to bed. Have a nice one.